So with all the chaos that's going on in LA, you got President Trump, of course, sending National Guards and Marines down over there to make sure they keep things in order. However, you got people like Governor Newsom that's trying to stop that from happening, right? So much so he has he's suing them to make sure that they keep the National Guards out. However, there's news that just came in that a federal judge ruled in the favor of President Trump to allow National Guards into LA. And the thing I find funny is just that it's like these Democrats, it's like they try their best to just allow chaos to happen in their cities, right? We remember with January 6th where Trump was he asked Nancy Pelosi, I think it was, if you want National Guard, to be sent down to the Capitol. Of course, she declined, and we saw what happened, right? And it's almost like as if that these Democrats want chaos to happen, right? As if the more chaos there is, it makes President Trump look bad. However, we all know that when it comes to the people in favor of what's going on when it comes to all these deportations, they're on the side of President Trump. This is what they want. So it's backfiring on a lot of these Democrats, and yet they're still just continue to make the wrong move. So let's listen to what they got to say when it comes to this judge ruling in favor of Trump. So let's hear what they have to say.
Let's bring in Fox News contributor Jonathan Turley ahead of this hearing tomorrow. Jonathan, which way do you think this thing's going to go? For now, the president has been vindicated. Is it going to change, or is it going to stay the same?
Well, Jillian, I think the important thing to remember is that the president's going to win at the end of the day because he has the authority and the resources to flood the zone with federal officers. He can do it in a number of ways, including the National Guard. He can even use the Insurrection Act, which is many of these California Democrats seem to be pushing him towards, which I don't understand. There seems to be a perfectly valid reason for calming the streets and getting security. You have a sheriff who said he was overwhelmed. You have National Guard that have been called out in other areas of the United States to make sure that these riots do not get out of control. Now, at issue with what's called Title 10 is that it starts with a statement that the president has full authority to do this. And then it says the governor shall issue that order. And what the Trump administration is arguing is, look, that's a mandatory requirement. We can federalize the National Guard and you are to cooperate. Newsom is saying, no, we both have to sign off on it. The court's going to have to decide. But this is going to happen. I mean, President Trump has made very clear that he is going to stabilize the situation and flood the zone.
I think, Jonathan, it also matters. There's a legal distinction in terms of what these troops, what these boots on the ground are being deployed in order to do, right? Because right now you have people saying that the legal basis for sending in the National Guard and even the Marines that are going to be there imminently is to protect federal property, right?
And what's crazy is that, you got this, they got this rumor where Newsom said that Trump never called him, right? And obviously Trump showed proof that he did call him, right? Because he called him, I think it was Saturday. I think it was, they said Saturday night. Well, he wanted to talk about what's going on there in LA, right? That he's going to send some troops down there because obviously it's so much chaos down there that you clearly don't have things in order. And when you got, these Democrats running these states and these cities, it's like they clearly they do a poor job of making sure that they can keep things in order. It's like they invite crime. They want the chaos. They want things to just be out of control. And that's just the thought process when it comes to a lot of these Democrats. And then you got Trump saying, "Hey, we got to bring law and order." And look, it all started because obviously they have ICE trying to go in there and collect illegal immigrants, right? And you got a lot of these Democrats saying, "Hey, this Trump is the reason why all this chaos is happening," when it's not true. Trump is doing exactly what he said he was going to do, right? ICE is just going in and trying to pick up the illegal immigrants. Now, if Governor Newsom, all he had to do was cooperate, or at least just not get in his way, all right? But they've created this atmosphere where if Trump and these ICE is trying to do their job, you got people now that's trying to become violent and say, no, you shouldn't be able to do this, when Trump is doing exactly what he said during the campaign and the people voted him to do this, right? So we already know that. So if you just let them do their job, this issue wouldn't happen. But of course, you got all these Democrats, Governor Newsom, that are just saying it's okay to create this chaos. Then what are people on the streets going to do? They're going to attack federal law enforcement. And then, of course, it's going to get to a point where if you're going to riot and create all this chaos, then Trump is going to bring in National Guards. And now he has to bring in the Marines to make sure we keep order in there. Right? And then I think, I'm not even sure, but they were talking about a curfew. So it might have to get to that. But it's all because of lack of leadership. Right? And it starts with Newsom. And we already know what he's trying to do.
Right. But then you have people muddying on the waters on both sides who are talking about how these people are being deployed to, quote unquote, put out the protests or quell the protests.
Yeah, that's simply not true, that they are being used to guard largely two buildings. But also the rhetoric here, of course, is getting out of control. You had a Democratic member, I believe yesterday, who said, look, ICE has to simply retreat or these types of riots will continue. Well, that's not going to happen. It's not exactly a useful argument to say you have to stop enforcing federal immigration and then the riots will stop. It doesn't work that way. The federal government has a right to enforce federal immigration laws. They're going to do that. And the question is, will local officials cooperate, and also whether the governor will cooperate to try to stabilize this situation. But it's a non-starter for Democratic members to say retreat or else.
Do you think that the governor's lawsuit right now is sincere? Meaning, do you think he has any guidance from his advisors that he could prevail, or is it more of a political showdown, a show of strength, countering the president?
Well, in fairness to Newsom, there is an argument to be made here. It depends how you read Title 10. But, there's a lot of confusion about what happened before that. President Trump just supplied records that he did in fact call Newsom. Newsom made it very clear on air that he was not going to approve the use of the National Guard. The federal government has a separate responsibility. They're not just pedestrians. They don't have to just stand there and watch as another riot occurs in Los Angeles. And this is hardly the first time that has happened. And so the question is when you act. And we saw in Minnesota with Governor Walz that he waited too long to issue the order for the National Guard to go out there. He waited until massive damages had occurred and many people were injured. So this court's going to have a tough decision to make going forward. No court likes to be in this position. But generally, the President of the United States has this authority. And more importantly, he most certainly can bring federal resources into that city.
All right, we will look to tomorrow to see the next steps in all this. Jonathan Turley, thank you.
So you heard that. See, and this is the thing, right? Like, I know Democrats are really hoping that this makes Trump look bad, but I think for a lot of people, they're opening their eyes and seeing the chaos that Democrats want to bring, right? They're seeing that Democrats want to stop Trump and doing exactly what he said, during the election. And this is going to backfire because people are seeing this. That like you have obviously illegal immigrants, waving, their flag, burning American flags, and American people see this and they're just like, okay, this is not right. Right, this is not right. This is not going to be something where you're going to get the American people and say, "Oh man, you gotta let them, stop, just leave them alone." That's not what's going to happen, right? It's going to backfire. People are opening their eyes and starting to see that, hey, you know what? You're waving your country's flag, and we're just trying to deport you back there, and you're saying bad things about the United States. So it just doesn't make sense. And I think a lot of people are like, nah, that's just not going to work down here. Okay. And I think these Democrats, man, like I said, they're making the wrong choice when it comes to this battle, man. This is a losing battle. They're not going to win. Like the people are approving of what President Trump is doing. So, we'll see how this goes and how bad it's going to get because, it seems like, a lot of these, LA, obviously, and you see Trump, like you talk about ICE, it's not going to stop with LA. They're talking about going to New York, talking about going to Chicago. Right, that's where a lot of them are in these blue states. So that's where they're gonna go. So you're probably gonna see more people, riots going on in other places as well. So we'll see how that goes. So those are my thoughts. Interested to hear your thoughts. Make sure you leave a comment down below, hit the like button, share. And if you haven't done so, make sure to subscribe. So guys, take care. Have a good one. Later.